as weird of a thing to say, it's a good thing for him, and more so a good thing for the nation, to show as an example that even if you have tested positive for COVID, we shouldn't be manifesting so much fear. And I think he'll be a good example of how we can show that we're strong and not be afraid.
You know, he got what he bargained for, you know. He wasn't paying attention to the rules, and I think he got what he deserved, to tell you the truth.
Well, I've always thought, and I think the president thinks it's a serious disease, and I think it's unfortunate that he got it. I don't think it's his fault. This disease was caused from something in China, and that it is not his fault.
That the president knew he had been close to Hope Hicks, who he knew was infected, and he went there anyway. It shows me that the White House staff and the people around him have no capacity to control the man.
I think if he comes out beating the virus, I suppose you could say, then it just should give courage and strength to people to recognize that it's something that has such a good survival rate for most, and to not live in fear.
I think that hopefully people that have been listening to him that don't think this is real, that they think it's some sort of a Chinese hoax, will take it seriously. I mean, that's what I hope happens out of this. I don't want to see anybody get sick. I don't want to see anybody die. But as the leader of the free world, and the way he's just written this thing off as like some sort of a fantasy, the reality's set in for him now.
He received his first dose of IV remdesivir. The president received a special antibody therapy. We did initiate dexamethasone therapy.
Since President Trump's admission to Walter Reed Medical Center Friday evening, it's been revealed he's received these treatments to combat the coronavirus: remdesivir, dexamethasone, and an experimental antibody cocktail from the drug maker Regeneron. Here's what we know about the treatments and what it might tell us about the president's condition. Among them include remdesivir, manufactured by Gilead Sciences, and it's been found to lower a patient's stay in the hospital by about 4 days.
And it was a placebo-controlled, randomized trial, which I've been talking about for some time now, which is really the gold standard.
It works by lowering the amount of coronavirus in the body. The NIH recommends remdesivir be prioritized for patients who do require supplemental oxygen, a treatment President Trump has received at least twice since his diagnosis.
We try some supplemental oxygen, see how he'd respond. He was fairly adamant that he didn't need it.
As for patients with mild or moderate cases of COVID-19, the NIH says there's, quote, insufficient data for the panel to recommend either for or against the use of remdesivir. Since President Trump announced remdesivir was cleared by the FDA for emergency coronavirus treatment back in May, its use for hospitalized COVID patients has become standard of care. So while its use in and of itself might not be alarming, it might indicate that his stay at Walter Reed may be for more than just, quote, an abundance of caution, as was originally reported by the White House last Friday. Remdesivir has been approved for temporary use as a COVID-19 treatment in approximately 50 countries worldwide, according to Gilead. But Trump's use of Regeneron's antibody cocktail is far less common. The drug cocktail is meant to provide the immune system with a temporary, immediate boost to help fight off the virus, but it's still in its clinical trials. And while Regeneron recently issued a statement claiming the cocktail reduced viral levels and improved symptoms in non-hospitalized COVID-19 patients, it's yet to be approved by the FDA for emergency use authorizations. But perhaps the most surprising thing we learned from yesterday's press conference is that the president is being treated with dexamethasone.
Say dexamethasone. I had to look it up.
Dexamethasone is a steroid. Its job is to suppress the immune system. And it's standard treatment for patients who are severely ill. But it's not recommended to patients who are not on supplemental oxygen or mechanically ventilated. Steroids in general can have side effects including anxiety, mood changes, and irritability, but at the doses used in COVID-19 treatments, they should not interfere with cognition or overall thinking. We'll be keeping a close eye on the president's treatments as we continue to get these updates.
The only vice presidential debate of this election now just 2 days away. Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Kamala Harris will take the stage in Salt Lake City Wednesday night. And the stakes couldn't be higher, particularly for Pence. He is the first vice president to debate while the president is known to be sick. NBC News political reporter Monica Alba joining me now. Monica, there are more than a dozen positive COVID cases in this White House cluster. What are the campaigns doing to keep Wednesday's VP debate as safe and as COVID-free as possible?
Well, Allison, it is top of mind for both of them. Developments just in the last couple of minutes, we're learning that Senator Kamala Harris's campaign asked that there be a plexiglass divider between her and Vice President Mike Pence on the debate stage in Salt Lake City on Wednesday. That's something we understand the commission has approved. We saw that in one of the senatorial debates in the last couple of days. So that's something it seems they took an idea from that and applied it here on this far bigger national stage. And for their part, the vice president's office spokeswoman Katie Miller said to us, if the senator wants to essentially put, in her words, a fortress around her, quote, have at it. So that gives you a preview of just a little bit of the changes they're already making. And we understand they're also going to be further apart than at a typical debate. They're going to be about 12 feet of distance between the two of them and the moderator as well. So these safety considerations are really significant heading into this debate that you would always pay attention to. Again, as you mentioned, it's the only one of the cycle between the two. But of course, much higher stakes and so many more people watching given the president's current coronavirus diagnosis, Allison.
Monica, let's talk strategy and prep. Senator Harris first. What do you know about how she's getting ready for this debate, what her strategy is for Wednesday night?
She has been doing a lot of traditional debate prep. Of course, she participated in a lot of those debates during the primary season with many more candidates on the stage. But similar to what she was doing earlier in the year, she's in a team of small group of aides. Interestingly enough, we understand that somebody who was playing the role of Vice President Mike Pence has been one of her former rivals and former mayor of South Bend, Pete Buttigieg, who you see in those photos there, has been actually spotted in Salt Lake City, where we know actually that Kamala Harris has been for the last couple of days. So it seems she's been doing even some last-minute practice rounds with him. And we should point out that the vice president just left Washington a short time ago for Salt Lake City. So both candidates are going to be on the ground more than 48 hours in advance to continue their preparations there. But these are two politicians who really do the more typical kind of prep, at least compared to Donald Trump, who basically spurned that kind of preparation and instead did different kind of sessions, as we know now, with several people in close proximity who then all turned out to be positive for coronavirus after those close quarter sessions. We've learned that the current vice president and that Senator Kamala Harris are really preparing with a lot of briefing books. They've been doing actual mock sessions. And something else we learned actually about Vice President Pence is that he was told, instead of just operating with the team that he had 4 years ago, like former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, who was critical and played Tim Kaine 4 years ago for that debate, the White House actually suggested Pam Bondi step in and play the role of Kamala Harris because of their backgrounds as former attorneys general, and of course to have a woman standing in for a woman, since this would be a more unique and new experience for the vice president to be debating that. So we don't know exactly how she was utilized, but we understand she was involved in some way. Pam Bondi, of course, a close ally of the president's, was involved in the impeachment defense team as well, Allison.
Monica, let's talk about Vice President Pence. He's no stranger to this process, debating Senator Tim Kaine in 2016. What can you tell us about how he's preparing differently in 2020 and how he might handle questions about the pandemic, given the president's positive diagnosis last week?
Absolutely. I think that's going to be a major topic of discussion. And really, we'll have to see how the vice president defends the president, who was consistently downplaying the virus for months, as we've seen. And as even Donald Trump admitted to Bob Woodward during those taped interviews that he did on purpose downplay the virus, he conceded to him. So how will the vice president defend that in light of now the fact that the president has himself contracted the virus? The first lady, of course, also sick with coronavirus. And though we understand they both are doing well, that's what both of their teams have said, so well, in fact, that the president is being released from Walter Reed Hospital today. A lot of questions outstanding here about the timeline. And so while the vice president, who is the head of the coronavirus task force, we all know, was absolutely expecting questions on the health crisis, they take on a whole new meaning now with this diagnosis. And he will have to answer for some of the mixed messaging also, not just from the president, but from his own doctors, I imagine. As for Senator Harris, she and Joe Biden have really made the coronavirus crisis a centerpiece of their campaign. Again, before we knew the president had come down with this, we knew that this was going to be a huge focus of her. That she was going to be basically criticizing the administration, again, pointing out that the vice president, as the head of the task force, bears a lot of the responsibility, Democrats would argue, for where we are in the pandemic. But again, it takes on a whole new realm of importance given just what's happening in the last couple of days. And there were a lot of questions about whether the vice president was really going to go to Utah for this while the president was still hospitalized. Now, obviously, we know since he's leaving Walter Reed, that was a decision that was made. And again, he should be landing there later tonight. But there is an open-ended question of what happens in the next few days with the president's condition, Allison.
Monica, you've also spoken with some of the president's allies. What would they like to see from the vice president on Wednesday night? Are there things they're hoping he'll avoid or handle a certain way?
Well, I think the vice president said it best just now on the tarmac when he was leaving. He said the president gave him the green light to go to Utah. So the number one thing is they want to project this sense of normalcy despite all the chaos that's going on in the last couple of days. They want to also say to the American people that the president, in his own words, doesn't want those suffering to be afraid of coronavirus, even though he's just been in the hospital for it. And they also want to really get back on the campaign trail. I spoke to some of the allies of the president's reelection campaign who said they're most eager to see the vice president get back out there with crowds and continue to make a pitch that the president can't do right now because he can't be traveling. So the vice president is actually going to be heading to Arizona on Thursday, Indiana on Friday, and continue from there. Again, because the main candidate himself is sidelined with coronavirus, the vice president is going to be stepping in and doing a lot more travel. And we should point out here, he's going to continue to do events, some of which I've been to and been at and reported on, which don't always have social distancing, which have inconsistent mask usage at best. So continuing to sort of flout some of these health and safety guidelines that the CDC itself has put out, the Trump administration endorses, the campaign has contradicted at times. They're going to keep doing that. And they're going to have members of the first family also hitting the trail in the next couple of days, Allison, to really do a show of force again while the president himself is sidelined with this virus.